What is up? What is going on, everybody? I am back with another video, and this time the Seattle Seahawks head coaching search has come to an end as Ravens defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald has been named the Seahawks head coach. He's getting a 6-year deal to come over here and to replace Pete Carroll and to be hopefully bring another Lombardi trophy to the Pacific Northwest. I absolutely love this hire. I think it's a great move by the Seahawks. McDonald's now the youngest head coach in the league. The Seahawks go from the oldest head coach in the league, from Pete Carroll, to the youngest head coach in the league in Mike Macdonald. I think it's a great hire. He has done some great things with that Baltimore Ravens defense. Very innovative, very clever blitz packages and defensive schemes. He's been talked about. I forgot what the quote was from yesterday. I think it was one of the NFL insiders called him the Sean McVay of defense. And he is coming to Seattle, hopefully in an effort to stop Shanahan and McVay. Speaking of McVay, and to get the Seahawks back into Super Bowl contention. So I am very excited about the hire. I'm going to dive into Mike Macdonald, everything with it, the whole process. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Do me a favor, hit like on the video. You guys did that for the Jorge Polanco video. Helps tremendously, gets it out to more people. And if you're new here, hit the sub button. Thank you to all my new subscribers. My last two videos have blown up a little bit. Talking about the Seahawks head coaching search and then talking about the Polanco trade for the Mariners. So I appreciate all support. And if you're new, welcome in. If you've been here a while, welcome in as well. So a little bit of background on Mike Macdonald. Went to Georgia. He started his coaching career under Mark Richt at Georgia as a graduate assistant. He worked at Georgia from 2010 to 2013. He was then a defensive assistant for the Ravens from 2014 to 2016. He was a defensive backs coach for the Ravens in 2017. And then he became the linebackers coach from 2018 to 2020. In 2021, he went to Michigan and was the defensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, I'm sure having worked with John Harbaugh in Baltimore, probably came highly recommended to Jim, and he got the job with Michigan. So, and Michigan had a top 10 defense in the nation in 2021 when McDonald was the DC there. Another quick little tidbit. I really like that he's worked under John Harbaugh, who I have a ton of respect for. Is a great NFL head coach. And listen, I know as Seahawks fans, we're probably not the biggest Jim Harbaugh fans. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're UW fans, I'm not, but if you are, I'm sure you're not a huge fan of Jim Harbaugh with everything that happened this year. But there's no denying that Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh both know how to win. So he's had two pretty good mentors in that category. So after being the defensive coordinator for the Wolverines in 21, he came back to Baltimore, and he's been their defensive coordinator from 22 for the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023. Baltimore, the top defense in the league in 2023 in terms of points allowed. They were also number one by DVOA. If you don't know what DVOA is, you can just Google it. Aaron Schatz's system used to be from Football Outsiders. Now I think it's on Analytics something, Fantasy Football Network or something like that. Defensive value over average. What I like about DVA, the thing I like the most is it's opponent adjusted. And Baltimore was number one by DVOA in 2023. They were number 8 in 2022 in McDonald's first year as DC in Baltimore. And interesting enough, they were actually 28th in 2021. Now, I don't remember if Baltimore's defense was depleted by injuries or something in 2021. So maybe that's a little misleading. If you're a Ravens fan, maybe you can, enlighten some of us on that. I just didn't have time to go back and try to find articles if there were a lot of injuries or whatnot. But bottom line is, by DVOA, they were ranked 28th in 2021, bumped up to number 8 in 2022, and then all the way to number 1 in 2023. So regardless of the reason, it was a defense that did not perform well in 21, and McDonald got them on the right track for 22 and 23. I don't think there's a single analyst or anybody out there that is questioning McDonald's X's and O's. He's done a great job in Baltimore. I'm going to get over some things he did this year as well. But I think everybody's pretty much in agreement that he is a tremendous defensive coordinator, tremendous young football mind, and certainly has the right schemes to win in this league. as always with head coach. And, and this, I'm not going to, I love the hire. I give it an A. The only thing keeping it from an A plus is we just don't know yet. But when you become a head coach, it's not just about scheme. That is important to remember. It's also about motivation and leadership. Um, and everything I've read sounds like Mike Macdonald's a great leader. All his former players rave about him. They had a lot of success, so right, that you would think that they would praise him. He's probably helped make them a lot of money if they hit free agency and stuff. But as a head coach, it's different. It always is. And that's true for any of these guys. I'm just bringing this up just as a reminder. I always want to look at everything involved. And, I don't want to, I love the hire. I just don't want to be a homer and talk about how amazing it is. We never know. And I would have said the same thing had they hired Mike Kafka, who probably would not have been a very popular hire. It's not always about X's and O's. It's about leadership too. Mike McDonald now has to go in front of 53, 56 guys, get them ready to play each Sunday, find the right words to get them motivated, the right speeches, whatever it may be. Um, at the end of the day, like they lost to Kansas City in the championship game. That's John Harbaugh. He's got to stand in front of the team and explain, what happened or whatever it is to 54 guys whose dream of going to the Super Bowl didn't happen. And I'm not saying Mike McDonald obviously stayed quiet. I'm sure he talked to players, but you guys know what I'm getting at. It's a little different when you're alone at the top and it's on you and the pressure is on you. So, that's going to be, something we're going to have to see how that goes. Curious to see what his coordinator hires are. There's a couple names that have been brought up. So we'll see how he does with hiring his staff and then see what kind of players he brings in, right? We talked about the X's and O's, talk about the leadership. It's also the Jimmies and the Joes, right? I always kind of laugh when people are like, well, this head coach won because he had this player and he was really good. We see it all the time. Oh, Belichick only won because of Brady. Pete only won because of Russ. Guys, coaches need good players. That's true of every coach that has ever coached in the history of the world. You have to have talent to win. The X's and O's certainly matter, but if, Mike McDonald's not good at identifying talent and you've got a high school defense out there, he's going to get worked, right? So, it's the X's and O's. We know McDonald can do that. Looks like the Jimmies and Joes he's done a pretty good job of with Baltimore as well. And then the leadership question. So everything points to a thumbs up. By the way, this is the last couple minutes was not to like deter anybody from being excited about the hire, just pointing out things that, there's some things we just don't know yet. And the question remains too, what direction does this team want to go in? You would think hiring a defensive coach, they may be leaning towards kind of sticking with the offense the way it is, maybe shoring up a little bit of the interior offensive line, and just maybe cleaning up, getting things a little more consistent and really focus on building back the defense. But I don't know. They may look to draft a quarterback and kind of reset that as well. So that's going to be, still a lot of question marks on what this team is going to do this offseason. But I think it's off to a good start here with McDonald. Listen, the young head coaches are having success in this league. Kyle Shanahan. I know Shanahan's not quite as young. I think he's in his mid to late 40s, but that's still pretty young in the grand scheme of things. Shanahan, McVay, Matt LaFleur's had a lot of success. Kevin O'Connell's had some success in Minnesota. DeMeco Ryans had a nice first season with Houston. So did Shane Steichen in Indy. I know they didn't get in, but still done some good things with the Colts, who look to be on the right track. Mike McDaniel in Miami. Who else am I missing here? Well, I feel like I'm missing a couple more that I'm just Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. And there's probably a couple others I'm just flaking on right now as you do these videos, on the fly. It's easy to forget a couple of these names, but a lot of these young coaches are having success. And I know somebody going, well, Jay, and I'm going to get into the offense versus defensive coach here in a minute, and I'll kind of start with that. A lot of you are probably going, Jay, a lot of those coaches you just named off are offensive coaches. Here's my thing. When you become a head coach, you're everything. You're the offense and the defensive guy. Now, yes, McDonald's background is defense, and that's what he's coming in here, with that being his pedigree, and that's probably going to be his main focus. But when you're a head coach, like you are in charge of everything. It's going to be up to McDonald. They want to go for it on fourth down, punt, kick, whatever. If he decides, hey, we got to throw the football here, that's up to him. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay are obviously offensive guys, but they can go up to the defensive coordinator and be like, hey, I want to blitz on this play, or we need to back off a little bit, whatever it may be. So At some point, these guys have to go. You have to look at them more than just OCDC. It sounds like ACDC. That they're head coaches now. So to me, they have that all in common. I know a lot of people wanted to go with an offensive head coach. That was kind of a very, and it makes sense, right? The league has gone with very much offensive coaches. That's kind of the new wave. John Schneider, Seahawks general manager, even talked about it at his press conference. He said that, when you hire a defensive head coach, what sometimes happens is that you get an offensive coordinator and you lose that guy very quick because other teams are looking for offense. Here's my take on that, and I'm going to come back to all of it here a little bit. One of the first things I posed on Twitter after Pete was, let go, I guess. I don't know what to say with it. Mutual agreed to part ways, whatever. Do you want to find the next Shanahan and McVay, or are you looking for a coach that you think can beat Shanahan and McVay? And either one, I don't think is wrong. Do you look for the next great offensive mind, or in this NFC West, do you look for a head coach that can stop those guys? And I am very intrigued by hiring what many people, I think, around the league think is that McDonald is kind of a defensive Shanahan McVay. And I like that. I'm very much intrigued by that. And here's the other thing. In terms of losing coaches, I'm going to say something here. Good. I know it sounds crazy, but if your coaches are getting hired, that means you're doing something right. One of the biggest downfalls, I think, for Pete Carroll and this coaching staff in the last few years is they have not hired very good assistant coaches. I don't think Waldron was terrible or anything, and Waldron got an OC job very quickly, but I don't know if Waldron's viewed as a head coach around the league. Clint Hurts going back to being a defensive line coach. He didn't get a single defensive coordinator interview. They weren't hiring the right assistants. When this team was at the top, Gus Bradley, head coach. Dan Quinn, head coach. Darrell Bevell got interviews. I think Tom Cable even had a few. Dan Quinn plucked Marquand Manuel for his staff in Atlanta. That's what happens to good teams. So, yeah, I would love to get an offensive coordinator in the building that's going to be here for 10 years and can work with Geno or whoever the next quarterback's going to be. But if you're successful, that guy's going to get a head coaching gig. And I think it's the same if you're an offensive coach. You bring in, we saw this defense struggle last year. Had they gotten an offensive coach, Ben Johnson, Mike Kafka, I know Johnson ended up going back to Detroit, but just use it as an example, and they brought in a defensive coordinator that kicked butt and got Seattle's defense in the top 10, he probably would have gotten some interviews next year. So it's kind of a catch-22, if you want to call it that. It's the one downside, I guess, to winning is that, yeah, you're going to lose some of your coaches. So if Seattle's in that position, that means they're probably doing something right. So it's just not something I'm worried about, to be honest. I want Seattle to get the best offensive coordinator possible. I hope he kicks butt. And if he has to go somewhere else, that stinks. I'd love to keep him, but it's the nature of the beast with winning in this league. So that's just something I'm not super, super worried about. And we'll worry about that when it happens, when we get to that point. So other thing I want to talk about is I really, really admire the way Seattle went and John Schneider and company went about the process of this coaching hire. In fact, it came out today. I think I saw from Rappaport. I don't know. I get, those guys all post something and I get the names mixed up, but that Seattle was willing to wait till after the Super Bowl to get Mike Macdonald. So they really, really liked Macdonald, but they didn't just zero in on him and ignore everybody else. Now, we don't know how all these interviews went. Maybe one of the reasons Ben Johnson withdrew his name is he wanted the Seattle job and they told him they were going to go get Mike Macdonald and he didn't really want the Commander's job. I don't know. That's all speculation. We'll probably never know. But they went through, they interviewed all the guys. It would have been really easy to just hire a Dan Quinn right off the bat, right? Would have made sense. Quinn's got familiarity with Seattle. He's been the DC here, kind of slide right in for Pete. And I'm not against Dan Quinn or anything, but that would have been really easy. They interviewed Raheem Morris, Patrick Graham, Evero, Kafka, who I wonder if there's a chance Kafka could be the OC for Mike Macdonald. Ben Johnson. I don't know if they interviewed Bobby Slowick or not. I think he had one interview with them. So I think they did interview Bobby Slowick. So they went through the process. They also didn't panic and make a hire. Now, I'm not saying other teams did, but Atlanta went with Raheem Morris. That might end up being a great hire. I like Raheem Morris. I think he's a good defensive coach. I think he's a guy that players are going to buy into as a head coach. But did Atlanta go with Morris because that was their guy, or were they sitting there going, we can't wait on McDonald. We can't wait on some of these guys. We got to get somebody now. That's how, if you remember, I think the reason why Dan Quinn stayed 2 years as the Seahawks DC is that because they won the Super Bowl, he went so far that teams were just kind of like, we can't wait around. Teams want to get things going. They want to get everything rolling and all the preparation. Listen, the draft is 2.5 months away. It's going to be here before we know it. So teams want to start getting everything rolling. So they tend to make that hire. But kudos to John for staying patient with it, not rushing it. And at the end, it seems like they really got the guy they wanted all along. Now, had McDonald not worked out, I do think they liked Kafka. I think they liked Ben Johnson. And I think they did like Dan Quinn. I think those were the guys at the end of this that really were probably in the running the most. But, they end up getting what looks to be their guy. And they were, like I said, willing to wait till after the Super Bowl if that needed to happen. I guess fortunately for Seahawks fans, the Ravens lost. Would have been nice to see them maybe beat the Niners one more time, but it is what it is. Looking at this year and seeing what Mike Macdonald did was really impressive. Like I said, they ranked first in DVOA, and they played some pretty good offenses this year in Baltimore. They played the Houston Texans twice. We saw it. Bobby Slowick did a real nice job. C.J. Stroud and company really took off. Houston scored 19 points total in 2 games against the Ravens defense. Ben Johnson's Lions, who was the offensive coordinator that everybody wanted to hire. He was the guy. 6 points against Mike Macdonald's defense. And I'm not knocking Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson was absolutely a legitimate head coaching candidate. I would have been happy with Ben Johnson as a Seahawks head coach. But Mike Macdonald dominated his offense. The Seahawks, I know we're going to laugh at that. Oh, the Seahawks, but they were 12th in offensive DVOA. So it's not a bad offensive unit. They had some inconsistencies and things they need to improve on, but this was a decent Seahawks offense. They scored 3 points against Mike Macdonald's defense. We remember that game. They looked atrocious. They did. In fact, that was kind of the game that made me realize the Seahawks were not legitimate contenders. Not that you couldn't get hot and something couldn't happen. I'll never give up on a season because you never know. But at that moment, it was kind of like, man, I don't think this team is quite ready for prime time. That was Mike Macdonald's defense that took them to school. The Chargers, with Justin Herbert at quarterback, put up only 10 points against Macdonald's defense. The Niners scored 19 points, 4 picks by Brock Purdy. Not easy to shut down Kyle Shanahan's offense. They put up, 28 and 31 on Seattle this year. I think it was 31 on Thanksgiving, then I think 26 in the other game, so almost 30 points a game against Seattle, 19 with Mike Macdonald. The Dolphins, 19. That offense, that's the offense put 70 on Denver. That was the offense that was unstoppable, in the early parts of the year. Now, I know the notion was Miami didn't play as well against better competition, but that's the better competition. Mike Macdonald held Miami to 19, held Kansas City to 17 in the championship game, including 0 points in the second half, despite the offense sputtering and not doing anything. Trust me, holding, and I know some of those like, 19's not super low. Listen, the modern NFL is built for offense. Pretty much every rule benefits the offense. So to hold Patrick Mahomes to 17, there's no way Clint Hurts' defense would have held the Chiefs to 17 points. There's no way his defense would have held Miami to 19 points. Now, some of that, like I said, some of that's not X's and O's, some of that's Jimmy's and Joe's, but those are impressive outings from Mike Macdonald's defense. And the Baltimore defense really doesn't have, like you look at the Rams with Raheem Morris, you got Aaron Donald. You look at the Cowboys with Dan Quinn, you got Micah Parsons. Now, Morris obviously didn't play a role in Donald being drafted by the Rams, but Quinn may have had a hand in Parsons becoming a Cowboy possibly. So I'm not discrediting the work those guys did, but Baltimore didn't really have that. They were kind of a collection. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney had one of his best seasons. Kyle Van Noy was extremely productive. Geno Stone, guys like that really emerged for the Ravens this year. So it's certainly a talented defense. I'm not knocking it at all, but I don't think it wasn't just like you had one dominant player that could just take over games, in my opinion. So um, I think that's another real impressive thing for Mike Macdonald's resume here. Couple offensive coordinator candidates I saw mentioned. Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks mentioned for current, Ravens quarterback coach T. Martin. If that name sounds familiar, he was the quarterback for the Tennessee Volunteers when they won the national title, I believe, in '98. And then he mentioned Zachary Orr. I don't know if maybe he meant Zachary Orr as a defensive coordinator, because Orr's has been a defensive coach for Baltimore. Now, sometimes guys flip flop. Sometimes coaches are just coaches, and you get guys onto your staff. Like, I'm sure you could go back to McDonald's resume somewhere, and he's coached an offense at some point. But I don't know if Corbin maybe meant as a defensive coordinator, or maybe I just read that wrong. If you're interested in guys like Kafka, Eric Bieniemy could be options. Now, I will say this because they're currently employed. Bieniemy might not be. Bieniemy actually might not be, because they're getting a new coaching staff in Washington. So Bieniemy might be free to find other employment. I'm not sure on that if he's currently under contract. Usually they're not. Usually it's like we're Seattle, where they tell assistant coaches, you're free to go find other work. Kafka is, I believe, under contract with the Giants. So you could still hire Mike Kafka. Someone can correct me on this if I'm wrong. I believe you'd have to make him an assistant head coach because that's the only way you can leave for a promotion. Coaches can't take lateral jobs while they're under contract, but that would be considered a promotion if he was considered the assistant head coach. So something to keep an eye on. I kind of wondered in the back of my head if that's why they interviewed Kafka a few times, was they were more intrigued by him maybe being an offensive coordinator for this team than the head coach, or maybe they just liked Kafka as a head coach. That's very possible as well. So those would be some names I would keep an eye on. And then there's other names that we just, don't even know about that might be out there. Listen, I have no idea how it's going to turn out with Mike Macdonald. It could be an absolute bomb. He could stink. But what we know right now, I really have to give this move an A. They went through the process the right way. They were patient. They didn't jump into a candidate. I'm not saying this to knock anybody, but like the New England Patriots, you look at what they did. Sorry, I had to pause the video for a couple minutes. My wife ran through. She's got actual work to do, unlike us just talking about sports. And while I did that, the Seahawks actually officially announced the McDonald hiring. So just in case any last minute things were going to go wrong, the hiring is official. But no, getting back to what I was saying with it is that, there's a chance. Oh, I was talking about the Patriots. Like, they hired Gerard Mayo, which may turn out to be a great hiring, but there was no other interviews. Just boom, Mayo's the head coach replacing Belichick. I really like that Seattle went through this full process. They interviewed multiple candidates. It would have been very, very easy to just hire Dan Quinn right away. And again, don't even think that would have been a terrible hire. Not going to get it. Quinn's not the head coach. It doesn't matter. But they went through the process. They interviewed offensive, defensive coaches, both sides of the ball, seeing what's best. And they were patient on it. And it seems like the guy they really wanted at the end, along with interviewing others, is the guy that is now the Seahawks head coach. And like I said, it's hard not to give it an A. We've got an innovative young mind coming in here to lead this defense, to hopefully put a stop to the Shanahan-McVay tyranny in the NFC West. So as we hope, and then Jonathan Gannon's there as well for the Cardinals. So listen, will it work out? I don't know. Coaching hires are crapshoots. It's kind of like the draft, even more of a crapshoot than the draft. It's why I'm willing to listen on any hire they would have made. No matter who they hired, I would have given a chance to. If you guys watch Brandon Nelson, he's a Seahawks YouTube guy, content creator, I should say. He made a really good point. Had they hired Kafka, Quinn, someone like that, we don't know. And it would have been like, hey, let's give him a chance. This, to me, with McDonald's, not only, let's give him a chance, but this hiring really does have me excited. I really think this could be something special here. And I really think they are bringing in a defensive guy that is on par with some of these young offensive coaches that we've seen hired, and maybe someone that can really slow those offenses down and get the Seahawks defense back into contention. Last thing I'll say is we've kind of wondered why Lumen Field has been so quiet the last 4 or 5 years compared to the past. One, the team overall just hasn't been as good, but the defense hasn't been good. The crowd gets loud for defense. That's what gets you fired up. The last few years, we've been going, oh gosh, just don't give up a touchdown. Don't give up a touchdown. We've been sweating it out. Maybe with McDonald now, we can get the crowd back into it a little bit. And I don't mean that as a knock on Pete. I absolutely love Pete Carroll, and can't say enough good things about what Pete did for this organization. And McDonald ends up half as good as Pete Carroll. It's a good hire. But, that's what's going to get the crowd back in, the defense playing better, getting that energy going when the team gets up a couple scores. That's what was great during those LOB days. I don't expect anybody to recreate the LOB. That's not fair. But they got up 10, 13 points. The game was over. You knew that defense was going to be cooking, getting to the quarterback, getting interceptions. So hopefully McDonald can do that. Still a lot of work to do for this team, but I think this is a great first step. Maybe I'll do a reaction to his press conference tomorrow when he's introduced. I think you got a lot more stoic head coach than you did with Pete Carroll. Pete was very energetic, very outgoing. I think from what I've heard with McDonald, read, watched his interviews, I think he's going to be much more subdued. But at the end of the day, it's the same passion, right? Like, regardless of what you think of Pete, Pete had that passion, that energy. He was just more outward with it. Some people are more inward with it. And I think that's going to be McDonald, but I think it's going to end up being a really, really great hire. I don't think there's a single person that I watch, listen to, follow that doesn't think this is a good hire. So have a great night, everybody. Let me know your thoughts on the hire. Remember to please hit that like button. That helps. And subscribe. I'm closing in on 3,000. We're getting there. Goal is to be there by baseball season. Also check out doing a YouTube content creator fantasy baseball league. Myself, Mariner Mojo. You love to see it with Jake, who was on his show last week. Couch GM's in there. I think Marine Layer Podcast, Mariner Muse from Twitter. I think there's a couple others, so I apologize. I missed some. We are doing a content creator fantasy baseball league. That is going to be a ton of fun. I'll have updates on that on the channel. I think Mojo's going to live stream that draft. I probably won't, just because, go watch it on his channel, but that'll be kind of cool, and we'll keep up with that throughout the season. So plenty of baseball content, plenty of football content. Welcome to Seattle, Mike Macdonald. Have a great night, everybody, and go Hawks. Peace.